The axe came down hard and the log split clean, and that was the moment Abraham Reed looked up from his work and saw the orc woman standing at the edge of the Grafen market with her arms crossed and her jaw set like she was prepared to outlast every single person in the square. He had seen orcs at the border market before, of course. They came down from the Highland clans every few months to trade iron goods and cured hides for grain, salt, and the kind of hard liquor that human distilleries produced, and orc brewers apparently could not replicate no matter how hard they tried. It was an uneasy arrangement, full of side-eyes and muttered insults, and the occasional shove that a dozen cooler heads had to work together to prevent from becoming something worse. But this orc woman was not part of a trading delegation. She was alone, and the way she was standing told Abraham everything he needed to know about what she thought of the company around her. She was tall, as orcs tended to be, with broad shoulders and a warrior's posture that made the humans milling around her look soft and uncertain by comparison. Her skin was the deep green of river moss in shadow, and her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid wound through with copper wire. She wore close-fitted leather armor over a laced linen undershirt, the bodice shaped to follow her frame with surprising elegance. The dark leather worked with small geometric patterns along the seams that Abraham recognized vaguely as clan markings. Her leggings were the same dark leather, tucked into boots that laced up to the knee, and at her belt she carried a short iron blade and a pouch that clinked when she moved. She was not wearing war paint. She was not carrying a spear. And yet every human in her immediate vicinity was giving her about twice the clearance they gave anyone else. Abraham set his axe down against the chopping stump and wiped the back of his hand across his forehead. He had driven his cart of charcoal down from the forest camp that morning, the same as he did every second Thursday, and he had about 4 more hours of daylight in which to sell it before the market wound down. He was not in the business of involving himself in other people's problems. He watched a market warden, a heavy man named Posner who wore his authority like a coat 2 sizes too large, push through the crowd toward the orc woman and say something Abraham could not hear over the noise of the square. Whatever it was, the woman's expression did not change. She looked at Posner the way a cliff face looks at weather. Posner said something again, louder this time, and jabbed a finger in the direction of the market's eastern gate, which was the gate traders from the Highland clans were technically supposed to use, as opposed to the main southern gate through which the woman had apparently entered. The orc woman looked at the finger. She looked at Posner's face. She said something in Orcish that Abraham did not understand, her voice low and unhurried, and then she looked away from him entirely, back toward the row of ironmonger stalls she had been examining before Posner arrived. Posner's face went the color of a beet. He grabbed her arm. The woman's hand moved faster than anything Abraham had seen in a market on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. She caught Posner's wrist before his grip could close, held it in the air between them, and said something else in Orcish that was delivered with the same calm inflection as the first statement, except that Abraham's reading of tone told him this one was a warning. Posner yanked his arm back, swore loudly, and turned to the crowd. "Anybody speak this creature's tongue? Because she needs to hear that she is not welcome through that gate, and I need her to understand it before she causes a problem." The square went quiet in that particular way. It went quiet when everyone was interested, but nobody wanted to volunteer. Abraham looked at his charcoal cart. He looked at the stall he had been planning to set up beside old Marit's firewood stand. He looked at the orc woman, who was now being slowly encircled by 4 of Posner's deputies, with their hands resting meaningfully on their clubs. Abraham Reed was 29 years old, a woodcutter and charcoal burner who lived alone at the edge of the Duskfell forest in a log cabin he had built with his own hands over the course of 2 summers. He had no particular talent for staying out of things that were not his business. It was, his late father had said with a mix of pride and exasperation, his most defining quality. He put 2 fingers to his lips and whistled, sharp and carrying. "That won't be necessary," he said, loud enough to cut through the crowd noise. "She's with me." The words surprised him almost as much as they surprised everyone else. Posner turned. His deputies turned. The orc woman turned, and for the first time Abraham got a clear look at her face. High cheekbones, a broad jaw, and eyes the color of deep amber that were currently leveled at him with an expression that could most charitably be described as skepticism bordering on contempt. "She's with you," Posner said. "She's a traitor. I vouched for her through the south gate this morning." Abraham walked forward through the crowd, which parted with some reluctance, and came to stand beside her. He could feel the warmth radiating off her, which was either the heat of the day or the heat of contained fury, or possibly both. "There's a problem with that." Posner's eyes moved between Abraham and the woman. "You know this orc?" "I do," Abraham said, with the kind of easy confidence he did not entirely feel. There was a long pause. Then Posner pointed at him. "Any disturbance she causes is on your account, Reed." "Understood," Abraham said. Posner withdrew. His deputies withdrew. The crowd shuffled and resorted itself and went back to the business of being a market. Abraham turned to the orc woman. She was looking at him with the same expression she had used on Posner, which was not particularly encouraging, except that there was something else in it now, something measuring and sharp. "Hello," he said. "I'm Abraham Reed. I burn charcoal up in the Duskfell and sell it here on Thursdays." She said nothing. "Do you speak the common tongue?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned away and went back to examining the ironmonger's stall, running her fingers along the edge of a set of iron tongs with the critical attention of someone who had strong opinions about metallurgy. Abraham stood there for a moment, recalibrating. "All right," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "All right." He went back to his cart. He set up his stall beside Merritt's firewood stand. He sold 3 sacks of charcoal to the baker from the lower district, 2 more to the smithy apprentice who always came late and always complained about the prices, and 1 to a woman buying it for cosmetic purposes, which was an application of his product that Abraham found baffling but was not about to argue with. He kept one eye on the orc woman throughout all of this. She moved through the market slowly and deliberately, examining goods and setting them down, occasionally responding to a vendor's pitched welcome with the same flat silence she had offered Abraham. She was not there to be charming. She was there to conduct business on her own terms, and she was doing it despite the fact that the majority of people around her were treating her like an inconvenience or a threat. When the ironmonger, a reedy man named Callum, began overcharging her in the obvious way that vendors sometimes overcharged people they thought would not notice or would not push back, Abraham watched her set the item down, say 3 words in Orcish that clearly had a specific and unflattering meaning, and walk away. She ended up at his stall. He could not have said whether she had worked her way around the market systematically and he simply happened to be at the end of her circuit, or whether she had come to him specifically. She stopped in front of his remaining bags of charcoal and looked at them, then looked at him. "Charcoal," he said, because he felt he needed to say something. She looked at the bags again. She picked one up, opened the drawstring, and examined the contents with the same critical attention she had given the tongs. Apparently satisfied, she closed it again and set it down and looked at him. She held up 4 fingers. "4 bags," he said. She nodded once. He told her the price. She produced 4 iron coins from her pouch and placed them on the plank he was using as a counter. The iron coins were standard border market currency, accepted by both human and orc traders, and their value was unambiguous, but the way she laid them down, one at a time, with a deliberateness that felt almost like a statement, told him she was paying for the goods and nothing else. No gratitude. No acknowledgement of what he had done for her with Posner. Just a fair exchange, and not a word more. He loaded the 4 bags onto a small wooden sledge she had pulled from somewhere, which he had not noticed before. She picked up the sledge's rope without looking at him and began to walk away. "You're welcome," Abraham said, quietly enough that it was barely audible. She stopped. She did not turn around. Then she walked on. He watched her go and felt with some bemusement that he had never been dismissed quite so thoroughly by anyone in his life, and that it had somehow managed to be interesting. He came back the following Thursday with his charcoal cart and found her already at the market. She was at Callum's ironmonger stall again, and the interaction going badly in the same way it had gone badly the previous week. Abraham watched Callum shrug and throw out a number that was clearly a fabrication designed to pad his margin at her expense. Abraham walked up, stood beside her at the stall, and said, "Callum, I'll take the same tongs. How much?" Callum gave him a number. It was considerably lower. Abraham looked at the orc woman. She was looking at him with those amber eyes, steady and unreadable. He looked back at Callum. "She'll take them at the same price." Callum flushed. "Now listen, same price," Abraham said pleasantly, "or I'll tell every charcoal customer I have that the sparks from your tongs are inconsistent and liable to damage ironwork, and I'll say it to their faces at the forge gate." The tongs changed hands at the correct price. Abraham picked up his charcoal sacks and moved on to his usual spot. He did not look back to see if the orc woman was following. He set up his stall, sold his first 2 customers their usual orders, and then looked up to find her standing 3 feet away watching him work. "Hello again," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said in a low, precise voice, "Karga." He blinked. "That's your name, Karga Mudborn," she said. Her accent was thick, each consonant deliberate, like she was placing them down the way she had placed those iron coins, one at a time with full intent. "Abraham Reed," he said. She absorbed this. Then she turned and walked away, and that was the whole of the conversation. But Abraham went home that night with her name sitting in his chest like a coal that had not quite gone out. He started learning Orcish 3 days later. It was not a decision so much as a compulsion. He found an old, battered copy of a trade lexicon in the back room of Graffin's only bookshop, a slim volume titled Border Tongue, a practical guide for merchants, which covered perhaps 400 words of Orcish and no grammar whatsoever. He bought it. He read it at his work table in the forest camp by firelight, mouth moving around the unfamiliar sounds, charcoal-stained fingers tracing the phonetic spellings that the book's author had clearly made up on a more or less improvised basis. The forest was quiet around him, and the fire was warm, and Abraham Reed, who had been alone for 3 years since leaving the town where he grew up, who had built his own cabin and run his own operation and made a reasonable but solitary life in the Duskfell, felt something stir in him that he had been careful not to examine too closely. The following Thursday he drove his cart down to Graffin in the gray light of early morning and set up his stall with a focused efficiency that Merritt, who was 70 and had known him since he was a boy, observed with one raised eyebrow. "You're in a hurry," Merritt said. "I'm always in a hurry," Abraham said. "No, you're not," Merritt said. Karga Mudborn arrived at mid-morning. She moved through the market with the same self-contained deliberateness, and Abraham watched her stop at a grain stall and attempt to indicate with gestures what she wanted and how much. The vendor either genuinely could not follow the gesture or was pretending, because the interaction was producing frustration on both sides. Abraham picked up his lexicon, which he had tucked under the counter, and looked up the words. He walked over, took a breath, and said, in what he hoped was Orcish, "She wants milled rye, 2 measures." The silence that followed was thorough. The vendor stared at him. Karga turned slowly and looked at him with an expression he could not fully read, except that it had the quality of something that had just been surprised, which was itself surprising given that she did not seem like a woman who was easily surprised. He tried again. The pronunciation was wrong. He could hear it himself, the way the vowels slid wrong and the hard consonant at the beginning came out softer than it should have. Karga looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, carefully and slowly, the same two words he had just mangled, and this time the consonant at the beginning was hard as iron hitting stone. He repeated it back. She tilted her head. She said it again, even more slowly, drawing out the distinction between the sounds with a patience that felt, on someone with her bearing, like a minor act of generosity. He said it back. She held his gaze for a moment, then turned to the grain vendor and said something crisp and direct, and the transaction completed itself without further confusion. Abraham walked back to his stall feeling like he had passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. She came to his stall that afternoon. She looked at his remaining bags of charcoal and she looked at him, and then she said, in slow, deliberate Orcish, a phrase he recognized from his lexicon. He looked at her, then down at the book, moving his lips, and worked out that she was asking how long he had been coming to this market. "About 2 years," he said in the common tongue, and then winced and tried to translate it. He got the number wrong. She watched him struggle with it and then said the correct phrasing with the same unhurried precision and waited for him to repeat it. He did. She nodded once, which he was beginning to understand was her equivalent of a gold star commendation. "You speak common tongue," he said. "Don't you?" She looked at him steadily. "You could speak it with me if you wanted to," he continued. "I've heard you say words in it. Your name, when you told me. You said that in common tongue." A pause. Then she said, in the most precise and deliberate common tongue he had ever heard, each word placed like a stone in a wall, "I speak it." "Right," he said. "I do not speak it here," she said. "People speak it at me. They do not speak with me. It is not the same thing." Abraham looked at her. He thought about Posner grabbing her arm. He thought about Callum and his two-tier pricing. He thought about the vendor and his theatrical confusion over a straightforward gesture. "That's fair," he said. She looked at him with something that was not quite surprise and not quite approval, but lived somewhere between the two. "I'll keep practicing," he said, tapping the lexicon. "It is very bad," she said, in Orcish this time. "I know," he said, in Orcish, with the word for no slightly wrong, and she corrected him with the same unhurried patience, and he repeated it, and something passed between them in that exchange that was small and warm, and he did not have a name for it yet. The following month moved in a rhythm. Thursday at Grafin. Charcoal in the cart. The market's noise and commerce and its quiet brutality toward anyone who was not its usual kind of person. And Karga Mudborn, who appeared each week with her sledge and her list of goods and her complete refusal to accommodate the market's prejudice, navigating it with a self-possession that Abraham found himself increasingly unable to stop admiring. He learned her schedule, though she had not told it to him explicitly. She arrived at mid-morning, worked her way methodically around the stalls in a specific order he recognized because it was also rational, prioritizing the stalls most likely to give her trouble early so she had the rest of the morning to conduct business in relative peace. She bought iron goods, leather supplies, salt, grain, and occasionally medicinal herbs. She never haggled, but she also never paid an inflated price, because if a vendor tried to overcharge her, she simply set the item down and walked away. And Abraham noticed over several weeks that at least 2 vendors had adjusted their pricing to prevent this, which suggested she had more negotiating power through silence than most people had through words. He kept learning Orcish. He used the lexicon until it fell apart at the spine, and he started keeping notes on loose paper folded into his shirt pocket, phrases and corrections in Karga's handwriting that she produced when he mangled something particularly badly, writing on whatever was to hand with a spare piece of charcoal or a stub of graphite from his supplies, letters that were sharp and angular and very clean. "Your words," she said to him one Thursday in Orcish, as he was struggling through a phrase about the quality of pine versus hardwood for charcoal production. "You put them in the wrong house." "The wrong house," he said. She picked up his piece of charcoal and drew a quick diagram on the edge of his wooden counter. 2 boxes labeled in Orcish. "Action words," she said, pointing to the left box. "Object words," she pointed to the right. "In your language," she said, "house does not matter. In mine, house is everything. The word changes depending on what house it lives in." "Cases," Abraham said. "Grammatical cases." She looked at him as if she had not expected him to know the term. "Yes." "The lexicon doesn't cover that," he said. "No," she said. "It covers nothing useful." "Then how do I learn it?" She looked at him for a moment, and he had the sense that she was deciding something. "Come earlier next week," she said, in Orcish, slow and deliberate. "I will be at the East Well at dawn." He was at the East Well at dawn the following Thursday, with a new piece of paper and 2 sticks of charcoal and the kind of alertness that came from having woken up at 3 in the morning and driven through the dark forest with stars overhead and his breath clouding in the cold air and something in his chest that felt embarrassingly like anticipation. Karga was already there. She was sitting on the stone rim of the well with her arms folded and the dawn light coming over the market's eastern wall and catching the copper wire in her braid. And when Abraham climbed down from his cart, she looked at him with those amber eyes and said in Orcish, "You are late." "The sun is barely up," he said in Orcish, and got 3 of the 5 words right. She corrected the other 2. She pointed at the well. He sat across from her. She opened a small leather-bound book of her own, which was filled with dense Orcish script, and she began to teach him grammar with the same systematic precision she applied to everything else, starting with the case system and working from there, stopping him when he misapplied a rule and repeating the correction with the patience of someone who had decided this was worth doing and was going to do it properly. They sat at the East Well for 2 hours while the market assembled itself around them, vendors arriving and setting up, and giving the 2 of them a wide berth that was less hostile than confused. He did not understand everything she taught him that morning, but he understood more than he had, and on the walk back to his stall through the filling market, he realized that he was happy in a way that was specific and identifiable, not the dull satisfaction of a job done, but something brighter. Something that had to do entirely with the woman walking 3 feet to his left who had just spent 2 hours correcting his grammar with her complete and focused attention. "Thank you," he said in Orcish, with the correct house on the word. She looked at him sidelong. The corner of her mouth moved in what was possibly the beginning of an expression. "Next week," she said, and went about her business. The trial came out of nowhere, the way trials in border markets usually did, which was to say it had been building for a long time in the dark and simply erupted into the light on an ordinary Tuesday. Abraham was not at the market on Tuesdays. He was in the forest, burning his charcoal mounds in the slow method that took 3 days of careful tending. He found out what had happened when one of his regular customers, the baker Theo Harwick, arrived at his stall the following Thursday with the kind of barely contained excitement that people wear when they are about to tell you something bad. Karga had been accused of theft. A merchant named Dervin Salk, who operated a dry goods wagon that came to Grafin from the southern towns 4 times a year, had claimed that she had taken 3 bolts of good linen from his wagon on Tuesday and walked off without paying. He had filed a complaint with the market wardens, who had referred it to the town's justice officer, a man named Court who had been in the role for 12 years and had a reputation for straightforward if unimaginative rulings. "Where is she now?" Abraham asked. Harwick spread his hands, holding cell under the warden's house, hearing set for tomorrow morning. Abraham was at the warden's house before the morning bell. He did not know what he intended to say. He knocked on the door, stated his business, and was told to come back at the hearing like everyone else. He spent the night in his cart in the market square, wrapped in his blanket, staring up at the stars between the rooftops and thinking about the way Karga corrected him, slow and patient, without contempt, as if she had decided he was worth the effort and was simply acting on that decision. The hearing took place in the open square, as hearings in Grafin did, because Court believed that justice ought to be witnessed, and Abraham had in the past considered this an admirable principle, and today considered it a terror. They brought Karga out in iron wrist restraints that were civilian grade, not the kind meant to hold a warrior, and Abraham could tell from the set of her jaw that she was aware of this, and was choosing compliance over the straightforward physical act of removing them herself. She stood in the square in the morning light, and Salk stood across from her with Posner at his shoulder and 4 wardens forming a loose cordon, and Court stood in the middle with his ledger. Salk gave his account. It was fluent and detailed and involved 3 bolts of linen and a specific sequence of events that was plausible enough to be believed, and Abraham watched Court write it down and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Then Court turned to Karga. "Have you anything to say?" Karga looked at Court. She said in Orcish, something that Abraham now knew was a denial, a full and complete statement of her innocence, with the specific Orcish construction that was used for a formal declaration rather than a casual claim. Court looked around the square. Anyone understand what she said? Abraham was moving before he had fully decided to. He walked forward through the crowd, which shuffled and opened and closed behind him, and came to stand beside Karga in the open space that formed the center of the hearing. "She says she did not take the linen," Abraham said. "She says she was not at Salk's wagon on Tuesday. She says she will name witnesses to confirm her location." Court looked at Abraham. "You speak Orcish, read." "Enough to understand a sworn denial," Abraham said. Karga was looking at him. He did not look back at her yet because he was watching Court and Salk and trying to read the room. "Witnesses," Court said. "Name them." Abraham turned to Karga and said in Orcish, "Can you give me names?" "People who saw you on Tuesday." She held his gaze for a moment that was too complex to unpack in real time. Then she spoke, and he caught names and partial descriptions, and he turned back to Court and translated. One of the witnesses was Merritt, the old firewood vendor, who had nothing to sell on Tuesdays but who liked to sit at the east well and watch the market. The other was a grain merchant named Haverson who sold to Orc traders regularly and had no particular cause to fabricate their whereabouts. Both were found. Both confirmed, with the mild discomfort of people who had not expected to be standing in a public hearing on a Wednesday morning, that Karga Mudborn had been at the north end of the market on Tuesday, well away from Salk's wagon, for the relevant portion of the morning. Salk's account had an inconsistency, Abraham noted, that Court's questioning brought out. The time he claimed to have seen Karga at his wagon overlapped with the time confirmed by both witnesses. Court's pen moved in his ledger. He looked at Salk for a long moment. "Dismissed," Court said. "The charge does not hold." Posner unlocked the wrist restraints. Karga stood in the morning light and looked at the square and at Salk, who was already retreating toward his wagon with the particular velocity of a man who did not want to be asked any more questions, and then she turned and looked at Abraham. He met her eyes. He could not read all of what was in them, but he could read enough. "I understood what you were saying," he told her quietly, in Orcish, with the correct case and the correct house and only one small error that she would correct later. "I wanted to make sure other people understood it too." Karga looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she reached out and put her hand on his forearm, just briefly, fingers warm against his skin, and the touch said something that neither language he knew had a word for. She did not come to the East Well the following Thursday, and Abraham sat there in the early morning with his charcoal sticks and his paper and told himself he was not disappointed. She came at mid-morning instead, walking through the market with the same controlled purposefulness, and she stopped at his stall and looked at him and said, in Orcish, something he had to work through twice before he caught the meaning. "You argued for me," she said, "in my language, not yours." "You were telling the truth," he said. In any language, she considered this, most humans would not have known the difference. "I've been paying attention," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Ask me something." He looked at her. He thought about all the things he did not know yet, about where she lived and what her clan was, and why she came to Grayfen alone every week instead of with a trading group. All the questions he had turned over at night in his forest cabin while the fire burned down. He thought about Karga Mudborn sitting on the rim of the East Well with the dawn light on her face, teaching him grammar with the focused attention of someone who had made a decision. He said in his careful, still imperfect Orcish. "Why do you come here alone?" A pause. "Because I choose to," she said. "That's not an answer," he said. "That's a sentence." Something shifted in her expression, and it was the first time he saw it clearly, that thing she kept carefully still most of the time, amusement. Warm and a little wry, the kind that comes from being genuinely surprised by something. "My clan is 3 days north," she said. "We trade with the valley humans." "They are," she paused, searching for the word, "adequate. They meet our iron with their grain and no one is killed, and that is the standard for success." She paused again. "I wanted to know if there was more to know." "In the border markets." "And is there?" She looked at him directly. "Apparently," she said. He sold the rest of his charcoal that day in a state of sustained distraction that Merritt observed with one eyebrow and no comment. In the weeks that followed, the market became a different place, or perhaps it was the same place and he was moving through it differently. He and Karga established a routine. Dawn at the East Well, the grammar lessons that were also something else, something that had no established name in either language, and then the shared circuit of the market where he ran interference on the worst of the vendor bias, and she informed him, in the driest possible Orcish, what she thought of the goods, the people, and the market's general character. Her Orcish corrections were precise and unsparing. She would let him get 3 or 4 sentences into a story before she stopped him, replayed the error in her exact voice, waited for him to identify what was wrong, and then gave him the correct version. She did not let him coast on near misses. If the case was wrong, the sentence was wrong, and she would wait with perfect patience while he rebuilt it. And when he finally produced the correct construction, she would nod once, and that single nod had come to mean more to Abraham Reed than most people's elaborate praise. He began to understand things about her that she had not said directly. She had been a clan warrior for 6 years before taking a different role, something administrative in the clan's trading relations, which explained both her bearing and her methodical approach to commerce. Her clan, the Mudborn, were known in the Highlands for ironwork of a quality that other clans attempted to replicate and consistently failed at, which explained her contempt for Callum's tongs. She had 2 brothers, one of whom she described with a word Abraham translated as loud but good, and the other with a word that translated approximately as dangerous in the way a river is dangerous, which is both terrible and beautiful. He told her about the forest, about the way the charcoal mounds burned, the days of tending them, the silence of the dusk fell in deep winter when the snow came down between the firs and made the world a different place. He told her about building his cabin, the first winter he had spent in it when every joint he had put in the walls had seemed to him inadequate against the cold, and the quiet pride of the second winter when it held. She listened to all of this with the same careful attention she gave his grammar, and when he said something that moved her or interested her, the corner of her mouth moved in that not quite a smile that he had stopped pretending not to watch for. He was in love with her. He recognized this with the clear-eyed resignation of a man who had not expected it and could not do anything about it, and was not sure he would if he could. He did not say so. He was reasonably certain it would land wrong, and he was also aware that whatever was building between them was building on its own terms, and his putting a name to it would be at best premature, and at worst a kind of presumptuousness she would find insulting. So he said nothing, and he came to the market every Thursday, and he got better at Orcish, and he told himself this was enough. The duel came at him like a river in flood, too fast, too large, too loud. He arrived at the market on the last Thursday of autumn to find it in an uproar. A clan delegation had arrived the previous evening, a group of 12 Mudborn warriors who had come south for the autumn exchange, and set up their camp at the market's edge, with the kind of disciplined efficiency that military organizations bring to everything. Abraham learned this from Harwick before he had even unhitched his horse, and he gathered the rest of it in pieces as he set up his stall. Karga had been at the morning's exchange meeting, the one where clan representatives and market wardens negotiated the terms of the season's trade, and something had gone badly. The something was this: a warrior in the delegation, a large man named Brax who held a senior position in the Mudborn's trading hierarchy, had been conducting the exchange negotiation on behalf of the clan. Karga, as the clan's standing representative at Grayfen, had had a different view of the terms being offered and had said so. Brax had taken this as a formal challenge to his standing, and under Mudborn law a challenge to standing could only be resolved through trial by combat. Abraham found Karga at the east well in the late morning, sitting on the stone rim in exactly the posture she always sat in, arms folded, back straight, looking at the middle distance with an expression he had never seen on her before, which was not fear, because he did not think Karga Mudborn was capable of the ordinary kind of fear, but something heavier and more complicated. He sat across from her and said, in Orcish, "Tell me what's happening." She looked at him. She told him. Brax had seniority in the clan hierarchy and combat experience that was specific to the Mudborn's method of dueling, which was not about killing but about dominance, and it was also not, as Abraham understood it, a gentle process. If she lost the duel, she would lose her standing as Grayfen representative and potentially be removed from the trading role entirely. The duel was set for the following morning. "Can you win?" Abraham asked. She looked at him for a moment. "I was a warrior for 6 years, she said. "That's not an answer," he said. "That's a sentence." She looked at him sharply, and then the corner of her mouth moved, and despite everything she almost smiled. "Brax is bigger than me," she said. "Stronger, he uses power, I use speed. You think you can take him? I think," she said carefully, "that I am not going to simply agree to terms that shortchange my clan because a man with more muscle than sense prefers I stay quiet." Abraham sat with this for a moment. He turned the lexicon pages in his memory, looking for something useful, and found nothing. "Is there anything I can do?" he said. Karga looked at him. The look was long enough and thorough enough that he felt it. "You have done enough already," she said, "more than was owed." "I didn't do it because it was owed," he said. Another long look. "I know," she said, and the way she said it in Orcish used a construction that he had learned carried weight, the kind of weight that meant she was not being casual. He went back to his stall and sold charcoal and thought about Karga Mudborn and the duel and the weight in her voice, and he did not sleep much that night in his cart. The combat was held in the open ground at the market's edge where the Mudborn camp was set up, and most of the market had come to watch, because combat between orcs was interesting to humans in the complicated way that a thunderstorm is interesting, compelling and a little frightening, and something you stood back from. Brax was enormous. Abraham watched him warm up at the edge of the space and revised upward everything he had imagined. Because Karga was taller than most of the human men at this market, and Brax was taller than Karga by a head and wider by what seemed like an impossible margin. And he moved with the particular deliberateness of someone who had never needed to develop speed, because mass and force had always been sufficient. Karga shed her outer leather vest and stood in the linen undershirt and form-fitted bodice she wore beneath, rolling her shoulders and settling into herself, and Abraham stood in the crowd and tried to breathe normally. The rules of Mudborn dueling, as explained to him by a member of the delegation who seemed pleased to have a human audience for the explanation, were these. Combat continued until one party yielded or was physically unable to continue. Both combatants used wooden practice blades of standard length, and the result was binding on both parties under clan law. It started fast. Karga moved exactly the way she had described, quick and angular, using the space around Brax rather than meeting him head-on. And for the first few minutes she was clearly landing more strikes, her practice blade against his ribs and shoulder, and once against the side of his head, with a crack that made the crowd flinch. Brax's expression did not change. He kept moving forward. It ended, as power usually ends against speed when the contest goes long enough, with a moment when he finally caught her. His hand closed on her forearm. He redirected her momentum with his own weight, and she hit the ground and he came down on top of her, and the crowd made a sound. Abraham's hands gripped the fence post in front of him hard enough to feel the splinters. Karga was pinned, Brax's weight on her, and the rules required her to yield or wait for a judge's call of incapacitation. She was not incapacitated. She was flat on her back in the dirt with a man twice her mass holding her down, and she was absolutely not going to yield. That much was visible from where Abraham stood. It was in every line of her, the set of her jaw and the way her free hand pushed against the ground. The judge stepped forward. He began to speak the words of a call. Karga's eyes moved to Abraham. He did not know why. He was no one in this context, a human charcoal burner with no standing in clan law, and there was nothing he could do. But she looked at him, and he saw it not defeat but something that cost her more than defeat would have, the recognition that she was going to lose this and there was nothing to be done about it. Abraham let go of the fence post. He walked forward through the crowd past the edge of the combat space. One of the delegation members stepped in front of him. "Human," the man said. "This is clan business." "I know," Abraham said in Orcish, the correct case and the correct construction. "I am making a formal request under right of standing." The delegation member looked at him with an expression that crossed surprised and confused. "You have no standing here." "I'm Karga Mudborn's," he said. He had not planned to say it. He was not certain the construction was right. He had learned the phrase from a section of the lexicon labeled bond claims, which he had read once and not fully understood, and was now, apparently, improvising with in front of 12 Mudborn warriors, a judge, and half the Grafen market. A silence fell over the combat space. The delegation member was staring at him. The judge had stopped speaking. Brax was looking at him from the ground with an expression that had changed entirely. And Karga, pinned under Brax's weight, was looking at him with amber eyes that were wide open in a way he had never seen them before. The delegation leader, an older woman named Gorsha who wore her gray-streaked hair in warrior braids and had been watching the duel from a carved chair at the edge of the space, spoke. She said in Orcish, measured and deliberate, "The human claims bond standing." "Yes," Abraham said. He met her eyes. "My Orcish is imperfect. I will say this incorrectly, and I ask your patience with it." He took a breath. "Karga Mudborn came to this market alone. She came because she chose to, which is her right. She has conducted the Mudborn's business here with skill and honesty, and she has been treated badly by this market's people, and she has held her ground anyway. And the terms she was opposing in the exchange meeting were bad terms, and Brax challenging her to silence her was wrong. And if there is a way under your law for someone who has bond standing to request that this duel be reconsidered, I am requesting it." He ran out of Orcish in the last 2 sentences and switched to common tongue without meaning to. And when he looked at Karga, she was watching him with an expression he could not name, because he had never seen it on anyone's face, directed at him, not once in his life. Gorsha looked at Karga. She said in Orcish, "Do you acknowledge this man's claim?" Brax moved off Karga. Not because he was told to, it seemed, but because the terms had shifted and the weight of the situation had changed the room. Karga stood up. She brushed the dirt from her arms with slow, deliberate hands. She looked at Abraham across the combat space, and he looked back at her, and there was a moment where it seemed like the whole market held its breath. "Yes," Karga said. "I acknowledge it." Gorsha looked at Brax. "The terms of the challenge are suspended pending review of the bond claim," she said. "The exchange meeting will reconvene." Brax's jaw worked. He was not happy. But he was also standing in front of his clan leader and 12 witnesses, and he was smart enough to know when a moment had moved past him. Abraham stood in the open space with the autumn sun on his face and Karga walking toward him, and he waited. She stopped in front of him. She was close enough that he could see the dust in her braid and the flush under the green of her skin from the combat and the brightness in her amber eyes. "Bond standing," she said in Orcish. "You know what that means." "I think I do," he said. "Tell me what you think it means," she said. He took a breath. "It means I'm yours," he said in Orcish, "if you'll have me." She looked at him for a long, thorough moment, and it was the most complete piece of attention he had ever been given by anyone. It went through every layer of him and it found something and it stayed there. "Your grammar is still wrong," she said very softly. "I know," he said. "Correct me." She said the phrase back to him slowly the way she always corrected him, unhurried and precise, and this time there was nothing pedagogical about the patience in it. It was something else. Something that had been building in the space between two people at a well at dawn and at a market stall, and in 2 hours of shared attention every Thursday for months. Something that had its own weight and its own warmth. He repeated the phrase, correctly this time. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face, and her palm was warm and her fingers curved into his jaw, and she kissed him, and it was nothing like what he had imagined and also exactly like it, warm and deliberate, and hers in the way that all her acts were hers, entirely and without hesitation. The exchange meeting reconvened that afternoon in the market's main hall, and the terms were different by the end of it. Gorsha was not, as it turned out, interested in shortchanging her own clan simply because Brax preferred a subservient representative, and once the numbers were laid out clearly by someone who was not trying to obscure them, the better terms were obvious and were accepted. Brax was reassigned to a different role within the delegation structure. He accepted this with the grace of a man who understood when he had lost, which Abraham found himself respecting despite everything. Karga sat across from Abraham at a table in the market's one decent tavern that evening, and they ate the kind of meal that the Grafen Tavern produced, which was serviceable if not excellent, and they talked in a mix of Orcish and common tongue that had stopped being formal practice and become simply the way they talked, flowing between the two as the words came. She told him things she had not told him before. The Mudborn clan had been in difficult years. 2 hard winters and a trade route disrupted by a mountain pass collapse had put them behind, and her role at Grafen was not just about exchanging iron for grain. It was about keeping the clan's relationships with border markets intact through a period when most clans had retreated north and let those relationships go cold. She had been doing it alone because the clan had limited people to spare, and because she was, she said with her dry understatement, adequate at it. "More than adequate," Abraham said. "Yes," she said simply without false modesty, "but it is lonely work." He looked at her across the table. The tavern fire was behind her and the light made her skin warm and the copper wire in her braid caught it. "I know something about that," he said. She looked at him with those amber eyes. "I know you do," she said. "I have been watching you for a long time." "I've been watching you too," he said. "I know that also," she said, and there was something in it that was warm and deliberate. She had known, had chosen the pace of this, had decided when and how it would move, and he felt with that recognition not diminished but deeply, profoundly seen. "What happens now?" he said. "With the bond claim, I don't know all of what that involves." She folded her hands on the table. "It involves," she said carefully, "that you are considered bound to me and I to you under Mudborn law. It is not final until confirmed by the clan, but the claim is made and acknowledged," and she paused. "I did not push you away." "You did not," he said. "I could have," she said. "Gorsha would have accepted it. I could have said no and you would have left the space and I would have yielded to Brax or not and the claim would have been nothing." "But you didn't," he said. "No," she said. "I did not." He turned his cup in his hands. He looked at the table and then at her. "I meant it," he said, "for what that's worth. I didn't say it as a strategy. I said it because it's true." She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "That is why I did not push you away." He went back to the forest that night to his log cabin in the dusk fell, and he sat by his fire and stared at the walls of the place he had built with his own hands and thought about everything. He thought about the East Well and the dawn lessons and the way she said his name, with the same care she applied to everything, read, 2 syllables, solid and considered. He thought about the way she had looked at him from the ground in the combat space, not asking for help, just looking, and he had walked forward anyway. He came back to Grafen the following Thursday and every Thursday after that, and the world had shifted in small but definitive ways. The market vendors had absorbed the story of the duel, and the bond claim with the speed that markets absorb any good story, and the atmosphere around Karga was different. Not warm. This market was not a warm place, and it was not going to become one overnight, but different. Posner gave her a wider berth that was more respectful than fearful. Callum's pricing adjusted permanently. A few vendors began learning Orcish words, just the transactional ones, but still. And Karga, for her part, began to speak common tongue in the market. Not all the time, and not with everyone, but sometimes, when the situation called for it. And when she did, she spoke it with the same deliberate precision that she brought to every language, each word placed and intentional. And Abraham would catch the moment when a vendor heard that precision and recalibrated their assumptions, and it was deeply satisfying every time. She came to the forest. He had not suggested it directly, but he had mentioned the cabin enough times that it had become a standing invitation. And on a gray morning in late autumn she arrived at the edge of the Duskfell with her sledge and her pack and looked at the path into the trees with the same expression she used on the market's more challenging vendors, evaluating, deciding. He met her at the tree line. He showed her the path. The cabin was modest, a single room with a sleeping loft, a broad stone fireplace, a work table, and shelves that held the organized accumulation of 3 years of solitary practical life. She walked through it slowly, the way she walked through the market methodically, touching nothing, taking everything in. She stopped at the work table where his Orcish notes were spread out in their loose pages alongside the destroyed lexicon and the replacement one he had bought when the first fell apart. She looked at the notes for a long time. "You wrote all of these," she said. "Since spring," he said. She turned and looked at him. The cabin was small, and she was large, and they were standing very close, and the late autumn light came through the single glass window and fell across the space between them. He put his hand against her jaw the way she had put her hand against his in the combat space after the phrase he had said wrong and then right. She leaned into it, and the weight of her against his palm was real and warm and specific. The reckless night began with one honest sentence. She said in Orcish, "I have been careful about you." "I know," he said in Orcish. "I am not going to be careful anymore," she said. He looked at her. The fireplace put warmth in the room and warmth in the copper of her braid wire and warmth in her amber eyes, and he said, in the plainest common tongue he knew, "Then don't be." She reached out and turned the latch on the door. Afterward, in the deep quiet of the cabin in the hour before the forest began its early morning chorus, he lay awake and listened to her breathing and looked at the ceiling of the place he had built and felt something he had no name for in either language, something so complete it was almost difficult to hold. She was awake too. He knew it by the quality of her stillness. "Karga," he said. "Abraham," she said. Not Reed for the first time, Abraham. Both syllables careful and warm, placed like everything she did with full intent. "I would like," he said, very slowly and in Orcish, "for this not to be one night." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The bond claim must be confirmed. There are things I would need to do, things we would need to do." "I know," he said. "You would need to come north," she said, "to the clan to be confirmed." "Tell me when," he said. She turned toward him in the dark. He could feel the warmth of her and the steadiness of her. "You are not afraid," she said. "I'm afraid of a few things," he said honestly. 12 Mudborn warriors and a clan leader are not at the top of the list right now. "What is at the top?" she said. "Losing this," he said simply. She put her hand over his in the dark. Her fingers were warm and strong and certain. "You will not lose this," she said, and the construction she used in Orcish was the declarative, the one that was not a promise but a statement of fact, the way she would say the sky is large or iron is hard. He slept after that, and the forest moved around the cabin in the wind, and when he woke the fire had burned down to coals and she was at his work table, writing something in her sharp angular script by the faint early light from the window. She heard him move. She looked back at him. "I am writing the form," she said, "for the bond confirmation. It requires a statement from both parties." She held up the page. "You will need to sign this." "I can't read Orcish yet," he said. I will read it to you, she said, and I will be honest about what it says. I know you will, he said. She read it to him, sitting at the work table with the gray morning light on her face, and he followed along as well as he could, asking her to slow down on the parts he was not sure about, and she corrected his questions and rephrased the sections that were ambiguous. And when she was finished, he took the pen and signed his name in the common tongue, and she witnessed it in Orcish, and the document existed, and it was theirs. He put the cabin in order over the following week. He made arrangements with Merritt's grandson, who was 17 and eager and capable, to tend the charcoal mounds in his absence. He loaded his cart with the things that needed traveling with, and the things that did not need to travel he left exactly where they were, because he intended to come back. He drove to Grafen on Thursday. He sold his charcoal. He met Karga at the east well in the morning, not for lessons this time, and they sat on the stone rim and she told him what to expect. The Mudborn clan was 3 days north, in the Highland Valley where the iron deposits gave the rock a red tint, and the river ran cold and clear and fast. The clan's settlement was not the nomadic camp that some humans imagined all orcs lived in. It was a permanent settlement of timber and stone, houses built to last, a forge at the center that ran nearly continuously, market grounds of its own where the clan's goods were sorted and traded. Gorsha led the Mudborn with the same combination of physical authority and political intelligence that Abraham had observed in her at the duel, and she would conduct the confirmation herself. Will they accept me? He said. Karga considered. Some will not, she said honestly. A human bondmate is not common, it is not unheard of, but it is not common. There will be opinions. What do you need me to do? She looked at him. Be yourself, she said. Do not try to be something you are not. Do not perform toughness or try to impress them with things you do not have. They will see through it and they will not respect it. What will they respect? He said. Honesty, she said. And the fact that you learned the language. She paused. And the fact that you walked into a combat space and made a claim with wrong grammar in front of 12 warriors. He laughed and it was surprised out of him. The grammar was wrong. Somewhat, she said, and the corner of her mouth moved definitively this time, and the full thing was beautiful. They left for the north on a Sunday, Karga on her own horse and Abraham in his cart with the horse that had been hauling charcoal down to Grafen for 2 years, and the forest road wound north through the Duskfell's high country and out into the foothills where the trees thinned, and the stone showed through the hillsides in long pale seams. 3 days of riding, and he learned more Orcish, and she told him about the clan, and he told her about his father, who had been a woodcutter before him and a good man with a specific and patient kind of love for the world. And she listened to all of it with her full attention, which was something he was still learning to receive without embarrassment. The whole weight of her focus turned toward him. On the second night they camped at a stream crossing where the water ran fast over flat stones, and she made a fire with the efficiency of long practice, and he cooked over it with the efficiency of long practice. And the meal that resulted was not complicated, but it was good, and they sat by the stream in the dark with the fire between them and the stars overhead, and she said in Orcish, "You are comfortable here." "I live in the forest," he said. "No," she said. "I mean here, with me." "You are not performing comfort, you are actually comfortable." He looked at her across the fire. "Yes," he said, "I am." "That is," she said and paused, searching for the word, "rare." "For you," he said. "For me," she said. "I am not," she paused again, "easy company for most people, I know this. I do not perform ease and I do not pretend discomfort away, and I correct people when they are wrong, and I am quiet when I have nothing to say, and most people find this." She stopped. "Intimidating," he said. "Exhausting," she said. "They work very hard to make me something I am not." "I have never wanted you to be something you are not," he said. She looked at him across the fire. "No," she said. "You have not." A pause. "That is also rare." He looked down at his hands, the charcoal-stained, work-roughened hands of a man who cut wood and burned coal and built his own walls and drove his own cart down a forest road every Thursday. He was not a warrior. He was not impressive in the ways that impress people. He was a decent, ordinary, hardworking man who had made a decent life in a quiet place, and the most extraordinary woman he had ever met was looking at him across a campfire and telling him he was rare. "Karga," he said. "Abraham," she said, and there was that warmth in it, that specific intentional warmth that made the two syllables feel like a thing she had chosen. "I have spent a long time being fairly comfortable with being alone," he said. "I didn't think I minded it much. And now," she said, "now I can't imagine going back to it," he said, "and I don't want to." She stood up from her side of the fire and came around it and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, and she was warm against the night cold, and he put his arm around her without thinking, and she leaned into it with the same deliberate ease she brought to everything, as if she had considered this and decided it was where she wanted to be. They sat by the stream until the fire burned down to coals, and the night was full of the sound of running water and the wind in the highland grass, and Abraham Reed sat with Karga Mudborn in the dark and was not alone. The Mudborn settlement appeared on the afternoon of the third day as a cluster of firelight and timber rooflines against the Highland Valley's rock walls, smoke from the central forge rising in a straight column in the still air, and Abraham felt his pulse pick up in a way that was neither excitement nor fear, but something more honest than either. They rode in through the settlement's main entrance, which was a wide gate of timber and iron that stood open during the day, and the settlement inside was exactly as Karga had described: permanent, substantial, organized in a way that contradicted every story Abraham had grown up hearing about how orcs lived. Houses with proper stone foundations, a well-kept forge complex that he could hear and smell from 50 yards away, market grounds with sordid inventory. People going about the business of a working community with the focused efficiency of people who had built something and intended to keep it, and people stopping to look at him. He had anticipated this. He kept his posture easy and his hands loose, and he did not look like he was trying to be imposing, and he did not look like he was trying to be small. He looked like himself, a man on a cart horse with charcoal-stained hands, following a woman who knew the road. Gorsha met them in the central square. She was in a different outfit than she had worn at the market, heavier and more ceremonial, and she looked at Abraham with the evaluating look of a leader considering an unknown quantity. Karga dismounted. Abraham climbed down from his cart. He stood in the open square and looked at Gorsha and waited. "You made a bond claim in public," Gorsha said in Orcish, "under Mudborn law. You know what that involves." "I am learning," Abraham said in Orcish. "Karga is teaching me." Gorsha looked at Karga. Something passed between them that Abraham couldn't read. Then Gorsha looked back at him. "Your Orcish is poor," she said. "Yes," he said, "I know. The claim you made in the combat space was grammatically imprecise," she said. "I know that also," he said. "But the meaning was clear," Gorsha said. "I hoped so," he said. Gorsha looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Then she said in the common tongue with less of an accent than he had expected, "You argued for Karga before that court, in her language." "She was telling the truth," he said. It seemed important that people understood that. Gorsha considered this. "What do you know about what you are asking for?" she said. He looked at Karga, who was watching him with her arms folded and her amber eyes steady. "I know it means I'm hers," he said, "and she's mine. I know it's a real commitment under your law, and I know I'm taking it seriously." He paused. "I know I'm not an orc, and I can't pretend to be. I know I'm a woodcutter, and I don't have clan standing or warrior's credentials. I know I'm going to keep getting things wrong in your language, and she's going to keep correcting me." He looked at Gorsha. "I'm asking you to believe that I mean well and that I'll put in the work." Gorsha was quiet for a moment. Then she said in Orcish something that Abraham worked through carefully and translated as, "A man who admits what he does not know is more trustworthy than one who pretends to know everything." She looked at Karga again. Karga looked back at her. Some old understanding moved between them. "The confirmation," Gorsha said, "will be held tomorrow morning. Tonight you are a guest of the Mudborn." The feast that evening was held in the settlement's longhouse, and Abraham sat beside Karga at the long tables and ate food he did not recognize and drank something that was stronger than he expected, and was careful with it. And he talked to the people around him in halting Orcish that produced smiles and corrections from the people closest to him, who were apparently willing to help once they saw he was genuinely trying. Karga's older brother was the one she had called loud but good. His name was Varel, and he was enormous and cheerful in equal measure, and he sat across from Abraham and tested him extensively on his Orcish and his intentions and his ability to handle a joke, and declared him, at the end of the evening, adequate, which Karga translated with the dry observation that this was a high compliment from Varel. The brother she had called dangerous in the way a river was dangerous was quieter, and watched Abraham from across the room for most of the evening with an attention that was not hostile but was very thorough, and finally came to sit beside him near the end of the night. His name was Soren. He looked at Abraham for a long moment and then said, in surprisingly clear common tongue, "She has been alone for a long time." "I know," Abraham said. "She does not let people in," Soren said. "You understand that what you are looking at is rare." "I do," Abraham said. "Good," Soren said, and stood up and went back to wherever he had come from, and that was the whole of it, but Abraham felt the weight of it for a long time after. He did not sleep well that night, in the guest quarters off the longhouse, and it had nothing to do with the strangeness of the place or the straw mattress. He lay awake and thought about the next morning's confirmation and what it would mean, and whether he was ready for what it meant, and found that he was not afraid. The confirmation was held in the open square the following morning, with most of the clan in attendance and the sky clear and the cold highland air carrying the smell of the forge. Gorsha conducted it from a carved chair at the square's center, and the ritual was straightforward in structure if dense in Orcish that Abraham caught perhaps 2/3 of. The essential elements were these. Both parties stated their intent, using the formal Orcish construction that he had practiced until 3 in the morning. Both parties received a mark, a small cut on the inside of the left wrist from a small iron blade, and the marks were pressed together briefly, and the binding was witnessed by the clan leader and at least 10 witnesses who were present in numbers far exceeding the minimum. He said his words. He got most of them right. He got the last phrase wrong in the way he had been getting it wrong for weeks. The same error Karga had been correcting with the same patience each time, and he stopped, and he started it again slowly, and he said it correctly, and somewhere in the assembled crowd Varel made a sound that might have been a cheer, quickly suppressed. Karga said her words. She said them perfectly, which surprised no one, but the way she said them, with a weight and warmth that were entirely distinct from her usual precision, something in her voice that he had been hearing in private for weeks, but that was now public, visible, hers for the clan to witness. He stood in the early morning light and listened to her and felt chosen in a way that reached somewhere in him that nothing had reached before. The marks were made. The clan witnessed. Gorsha stood. She said in Orcish something Abraham understood now, fully and completely without needing to translate it. "This is done. This is real. This is recognized by the Mudborn." The square filled with a sound that was not quite what he had imagined. Not a cheer exactly, but something larger and more complex, approval and witness, and the particular warmth of a community recognizing a thing that had been chosen freely. Karga turned to him. She took his marked wrist in her hand and looked at it and then looked at him. "Well done," she said in Orcish. "I practiced," he said. "I know," she said, and her voice had that warmth in it that she saved for him, only for him. "You always practice." He reached out and put his hands on her face, and she leaned into them, and he kissed her in the open square of the Mudborn settlement with the highland sky overhead and the forge smoke rising and the clan around them. And the warmth of her was everything he had known it would be and more, and she kissed him back with the full intent she brought to everything she did. Brax watched from the edge of the square. He did not look happy. He also did not do anything about it, and by the end of the morning he had apparently found something else to attend to, and Abraham wished him well with it and put him out of his thoughts entirely. He spent 4 more days with the Mudborn. Gorsha showed him the forge complex, which was extraordinary, a series of connected chambers with heat managed through a system of stone channels and air vents that showed generations of refinement and knowledge. He looked at it with the specific appreciation of a man who had spent years managing fire for a living, and Gorsha watched him look at it and seemed, slightly, satisfied. He helped with a hauling project, moving timber for a new house being built at the settlement's north end, which turned out to be the kind of work that required no common language and served as a universal introduction. And by the end of it, he had exchanged names with 7 people, and had one warrior clap him on the back hard enough to stagger him and laugh at his expression, which he took as a good sign. Karga watched all of this from various distances, with an expression he had come to recognize as her version of warmth, steady and particular, and all for him. On the last evening, sitting with her in the longhouse after most of the clan had gone to their beds, he said, in Orcish with the comfortable fluency that had been building for months and had improved considerably in the last week of immersion, "What happens now?" She looked at him. The fire was low and the longhouse was quiet, and she was sitting close enough that he could feel her warmth. "Now," she said, "you go back to your forest and your charcoal mounds and your Thursday market." "And you?" he said. "I return to Grayfen," she said, "to my work there as I have been doing." "Together," he said. She looked at him. "I am not going to take you away from the life you have built," she said. "That life is yours, and it is good, and it is part of who you are." "What if I want to be part of your life here as well as mine there?" he said. "Then we find a way," she said. "We are both, as you have observed, people who are good at finding a way." She paused. "The North Road is 3 days. I travel it every week. It does not have to be one place or the other." "That sounds like a lot of riding," he said. "Yes," she said. "Good thing I don't mind the road," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Abraham." "Karga," he said. "I need to tell you something," she said, and her voice had a specific quality that made him listen with his whole self. "Tell me," he said. "I chose this market," she said, 3 years ago. When the clan needed a trade representative for the border market, I chose it. I told Gorsha I would do it. Everyone else thought the Grayfen market was too small, too much trouble, too many difficult humans. I wanted it." "Why?" he said. "Because," she said, "Grayfen is where the forest road comes out, and the forest road is where the charcoal burner drives his cart down every second Thursday." She paused. "I had seen you before you saw me. At the road's edge in the summer before last. You were hauling wood and you stopped to let a deer cross the path and you watched it go before you moved on. And I thought—" She stopped. "What did you think?" he said softly. "I thought there is a careful man," she said. "A man who sees things. I thought I would like to know if that was true." He stared at her. "You chose the market because of me." "I chose it because of all the reasons I told you," she said. "The clan needed the trade relationship. The work was important. Those things are true." A pause. "But also because of you." "Yes." "Karga," he said. "I know," she said, and her voice was warm. "It is a lot." "It is," he said. He reached over and took her hand. She let him, which she always let him now, the ease of it still something that moved him. "I am glad you chose it," he said. "I know that too," she said. In the morning she walked with him to his cart at the settlement's gate. The clan was waking around them, the forge already lit, the first smoke rising in the clear highland air. His cart horse stamped once and settled. He turned to her. She was in the early light, tall and steady, the copper in her braid catching the sun, her amber eyes warm and direct. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she confirmed. "I'll be at the Eastwell Thursday before dawn," he said. "You are always there before dawn," she said. "Even when you do not need to be." "I like the mornings," he said, "especially those mornings." She stepped forward and put both hands on his face, cradling it the way she had done in the forest cabin, in the dark and the warmth. And she looked at him with her full attention and kissed him slowly, deliberately, the way she did everything, as if she had considered it and decided it was exactly what she wanted to do. He wrapped his arms around her and held on, and she let him, her hands sliding from his face to his shoulders, and they stood in the gate of the Mudborn settlement in the morning light, and he was not going to cry, but it was a near thing. When she stepped back, her hands stayed on his shoulders for a moment. "Go," she said in Orcish, the gentle imperative, not the dismissive one. "Going," he said in Orcish, correct case, correct house. She nodded once, that one nod that meant more than elaborate praise. He climbed up onto his cart. He turned the horse. He drove out through the gate and down the Highland Road, and he looked back once, and she was still standing in the gate, watching him go, tall and still in the morning light. He drove 3 days back south through the high country and the foothills and into the Duskfell forest, and the trees closed around him, and he smelled the pine and the old wood smell of the place he had lived in for 3 years, and it was familiar and good and home, and he felt it differently now than he had before, not as the solitary man's fortress against loneliness, but as something he was bringing into a larger life. He checked his charcoal mounds. He thanked Marit's grandson, who had done a good job and been proud of it. He ate a proper meal at his work table and looked at Karga's handwriting on the notes spread across the surface and felt warm throughout. On Sunday, he began loading the cart for Thursday. He did this with more care than usual, choosing the best grade charcoal for his regular customers, thinking about the layout of the stall and the small adjustments that might make the morning more efficient. All of it the same as he had done for 2 years, but with the particular brightness of a man who knows what he is going back to. Thursday came. He drove down the forest road in the dark, with the stars ahead and the cold air on his face, and the Duskfell opened out into the border country and then into the Grafen Road, and the market appeared in the gray before dawn, its rooftops and the east well's stone circle visible against the lightening sky. He unhitched his horse and set up his stall beside Marit's firewood stand, and then he walked to the east well and sat on the stone rim and waited. The sky went from gray to pale gold. The market began to assemble itself in its familiar way, vendors arriving with their carts and their noise. The eastern gate opened. Karga Mudborn came through it on foot, her sledge behind her, her dark braid wound with copper wire, the leather armor close-fitted and worn with the ease of something that had always belonged exactly where it was. She walked through the market with her particular purposeful stride, and vendors who had learned better got out of her way with something approaching courtesy, and she came across the market square to the east well where Abraham Reed was sitting in the morning light. She sat down across from him on the stone rim. She folded her arms, she looked at him. "You are early," he said in Orcish. "So are you," she said in Orcish. He took his folded paper and his charcoal stick from his pocket. He looked at her. "I have been practicing the indirect conditional," he said. "I think I have been constructing it wrong for 3 months." She raised an eyebrow. "Let me hear it," she said. He said the phrase. He was right, it was wrong. He could hear it even as the words came out. She leaned forward slightly, her elbows on her knees, her eyes on him with that full and specific attention that he had learned to receive as the gift it was. She said the phrase back to him slowly, drawing the distinction out with precision. Not impatient, not indulgent, just exact. He repeated it, better. She said it again, the difficult syllable given more space. He repeated it. He got it right. She nodded once. He smiled, and she looked at the smile with the warmth she kept for him, and the market filled up around them with its commerce and its noise and its complicated humanity, and the sun came up over the eastern gate and put its light on the stone well and on Karga Mudborn's copper wire and on Abraham Reed's charcoal-stained hands, and it was just an ordinary Thursday morning at the border market, except that it was everything. Weeks passed, and they found their rhythm. Grafen on Thursdays. The North rode when the clan needed her, and she made the 3-day journey, and Abraham made it too when he could, which was not every time but was enough. His charcoal mounds ran themselves on a predictable schedule that allowed him windows of freedom he had not previously made use of. He added a room to his cabin. He did not say to Karga directly that this was for her. He mentioned that the storage had been limited. She came to the cabin one evening, and walked through the new room with the same methodical attention she gave everything, ran her hands along the joints of the wall, checked the fitting of the new window against its frame, and turned to him with her arms folded. "The corner joint is slightly loose," she said. "I know," he said. "I was going to fix it this week." "I will fix it," she said. "You don't have to," he said. "I know I do not have to," she said. "I want to." She fixed it the next morning with a precision that he observed and learned from, her hands on the wood with the same sureness she brought to everything physical. When it was done, she looked at the room with a different expression, one he recognized from the longhouse in the Mudborn settlement, where she had shown him the clan's history in the carvings on the beams. The expression of someone who has put their hands into a thing and made it part of their story. She started keeping things at the cabin. Small things at first, her leather pack when she did not want to carry it on market days, her personal copy of the small grammar book she had been using to teach him. Then a spare set of leathers, hung on the peg near the door. Then the leather-bound book with the Orcish script, placed on the shelf beside his Orcish notes. He watched this with quiet joy that he kept at a manageable volume because she did not require his commentary on it. She was doing what she did with everything, deciding what she wanted, and then acting on the decision with complete and unhurried intent. The winter came down hard into the Duskfell forest, and the market at Grafen slowed to its cold season version, a smaller, more essential gathering of people who needed goods and could not wait for spring. Karga reduced her trips north, because the Highland Road became difficult in deep winter, and the clan's needs were largely met until the spring exchange. She spent 3 weeks at the cabin in the depths of January, which was the longest she had stayed continuously, and it was neither awkward nor dramatic. It was simply the life they had built, her adding her particular order to the cabin's routines and him learning where that order differed from his own and making room for it. They talked more in that 3-week stretch than they had in any comparable period. Long evenings by the fire with the snow coming down outside and the forest silent and white, and the warmth inside, and the two of them with cups of heated wine, and the kind of conversation that happened between people who were genuinely interested in each other's minds. She told him the whole history of the Mudborn clan, the 3 founding families and the forge that had been their original common purpose, and the wars that had shaped them, and the treaties that had ended those wars, and the uneasy peace that the current generation was navigating. She told it as someone who had lived inside it and thought carefully about it, and she asked his observations in return, which he gave honestly, and she listened to them with the same care she gave everything. He told her about his father's death, which he had not told many people, the quick illness in the winter of his 25th year that had taken a man who had been entirely healthy and left Abraham abruptly alone in the world. He told her how he had moved to the Duskfell afterward, not running from it but choosing the kind of solitude that felt like something he was doing deliberately rather than something that was happening to him. She listened to all of this. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You have been taking care of yourself for a long time, alone." "Yes," he said. "You are good at it," she said. "Thank you," he said. "You are also," she said, "very good at taking care of other people. You just have not had much opportunity." He looked at her. "Is that what I've been doing?" "Yes," she said, "since the first Thursday, when you walked forward through the crowd. You saw someone who was being treated poorly and you put yourself between it and them. That is not nothing. That is," she paused, "a kind of person, a specific kind." He did not have anything to say to that for a moment. "What kind?" he said. "The kind worth keeping," she said, and her voice was warm and direct, and she was looking at him with those amber eyes that held all their warmth for him, only for him. He moved to sit beside her, and she made room without being asked, and he put his arm around her and she settled into it, and they sat with the fire and the winter and the snow outside and the whole weight of the life they had built pressing warmly around them. When the spring roads opened and the Highland Pass cleared, they went north together. He had made the journey twice before on his own in the cart, but this time they rode together, and the roads were different in spring, the highland grass greening and the stream crossings running fast and clear with snowmelt. She pointed out landmarks he had not noticed the first 2 times, places with names and histories in Orcish that she taught him as they rode. He added them to his notes. The Mudborn settlement in spring was a different thing from the winter quiet place he had visited for the confirmation. The forge ran day and night to fulfill spring commissions. The market grounds were active and loud. People moved with the energy of a community that had been through the closed season and was opening back up. Gorsha met them in the central square, and she looked at them together, and something in her expression was settled, decided, as if she had had a question for a long time and was now satisfied with the answer. The Grafen trade terms, she said to Karga, were submitted for the spring exchange. They are better. Yes, Karga said. You renegotiated them, Gorsha said. We renegotiated them, Karga said. She did not gesture at Abraham, but her use of the plural was clear. Gorsha looked at Abraham. You have opinions about iron trade terms, she said in common tongue. I have opinions about when someone is being shorted, he said. Whether it's iron or charcoal or a human grain merchant taking advantage of the fact that someone doesn't have a common advocate in the room. Gorsha considered him. You are straightforward, she said. I try to be, he said. Good, she said, and walked away, and he had the sense that this was high praise. Brax was there. He looked at Abraham and Karga together, and his expression was complex. And then he looked away. And Abraham did not hold any grudge about it because Brax was dealing with things in his own way, and that was his right. The Mudborn spring trade was conducted over 4 days, and Abraham contributed where he could, which was mostly in the practical logistics of shipping and storage, where his years of moving charcoal had given him a specific and useful knowledge base. Verrill adopted him with full enthusiasm on day 2 and dragged him into several conversations he only partially understood, and Karga translated the parts he missed with patient efficiency. On the 4th day, as they were preparing to ride back south, Soren found Abraham at the stables. She is lighter, Soren said. He did not elaborate. He looked at Abraham with his careful river-current eyes. Abraham looked back at him. I'm glad, he said. Soren nodded. He looked out at the settlement, the forge smoke, the people in the morning. She carries a lot, he said. She always has. She does not put it down easily. I know, Abraham said. You do not try to take it from her, Soren said. That is the right approach. I wouldn't dream of trying, Abraham said honestly. Soren almost smiled. No, he said. I can see that. He turned back toward the settlement. Come back in summer, he said. There is a festival. She has not attended it in 3 years. I'll mention it, Abraham said. They rode south in the spring warmth, and the Highland road was long and easy, and they talked for most of it. And she told him about the summer festival, the Mudborn's annual gathering that brought in clan members who traveled for the occasion, and he said he would very much like to attend. And she looked at him with the kind of warmth that was so complete it still moved him. Every time, the way a fine piece of work always moved him, no matter how many times he looked at it. You know, he said, as they came down into the foothills and the duskfell appeared on the horizon, a dark line of trees against the spring sky. When I bought that lexicon, I was mostly hoping to be able to order your grain for you without mangling it. She looked at him sidelong. And now I dream in Orcish sometimes, he said. Badly, I'm sure you would correct it. Almost certainly, she said. I rely on it, he said. She reached over from her horse and put her hand briefly on his arm. I know, she said. I rely on it too. They came down through the foothills and into the border country, and past the place where the forest road met the Grafen road, and the market appeared in the afternoon light, its rooftops familiar and the east well visible from the road. He would set up his stall tomorrow. He would sell charcoal and talk to Merritt and complain about the prices with Harwick and watch Karga work her way around the market with that contained purposefulness. And he would be at the east well the following morning with his notes and his charcoal stick. And she would sit across from him on the stone rim and correct whatever he had gotten wrong that week with the patient precision that was its own kind of love. And none of it was extraordinary or dramatic, and all of it was exactly what he wanted. He turned his horse onto the Grafen road and she rode beside him, and the late afternoon sun was warm on their backs, and the market opened up ahead of them, and they rode into it together. That evening they sat at his stall after the market closed, on the wooden bench that the vendors left there overnight, with the square going quiet around them and the last of the day's light fading over the rooftops. She had a cup of the tavern's rough cider and he had the same, and the market smelled of hay and horse and the day's commerce, and it was easy between them in a way that still struck him sometimes as the best thing he had ever managed. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask," he said. She turned her cup in her hands. She looked at the square, at the East Wells stone circle visible in the dusk. "The cabin," she said, "the room you built." "Yes," he said. "I want to live in it," she said. "Not just stay in it, live in it, come back to it, keep coming back to it." He looked at her. "You know that's been true since before I built the room," he said. "I know," she said, "but I wanted to say it directly. It's yours," he said. "It's been yours. The whole cabin's been yours since you looked at that corner joint and told me it was loose." She looked at him sidelong and the corner of her mouth moved full and warm. "It was loose," she said. "It was," he agreed. She leaned against his shoulder, easy and certain, and they sat in the quieting market, while the stars came out above Grafen's rooftops, and the east well caught the first starlight on its stone rim, and Abraham Reed sat with Karga Mudborn in the dusk of an ordinary day and felt, to the roots of him, found. When the summer festival came, they rode north, and Karga wore her copper wire in her braid and her fitted leather armor with the clan markings along the seams, and she walked through the festival ground of the Mudborn settlement with her head up and Abraham Reed at her side, and the whole of the Mudborn clan saw them together in the summer light. Gortia opened the festival with a short speech, as was the tradition, and at the end of it she said, in Orcish that Abraham now understood almost entirely, that this year's gathering was also a celebration of the bond between Karga Mudborn and her chosen mate, the woodcutter from the border forest who had learned their language, argued for their clan representative in public, and proved himself by every measure that mattered. The assembled clan made the sound that was not quite a cheer but was larger and warmer, and Verrill's contribution to it was identifiable at a distance, and Soren stood at the edge of the crowd and watched with his river-current eyes and inclined his head once at Abraham, which Abraham returned. Karga put her hand in his. Her fingers were warm and strong and certain. He held on. That night the festival fires burned high, and the highland sky was full of stars, and the Mudborn danced, a long circular dance that he did not know, and she taught him the steps with the same patient instruction she brought to everything, correcting his feet with the same unhurried precision she used on his grammar, and he got it wrong 3 times and right the 4th, and she nodded once, and they danced in the firelight with the clan around them and the summer night large and warm above the highland valley. And when the night grew late and the fires burned lower, she led him away from the festival ground and up to the high edge of the settlement where you could see the valley spread below and the river catching the starlight, and she stood beside him and looked at it with him, and he put his arm around her and she leaned into him, and the valley was beautiful and the night was full and there was nothing more to want. "You made a claim once," she said, "with wrong grammar." "I remember," he said. "The grammar is better now," she said. "Because of you," he said. She turned to look at him. The starlight was in her amber eyes and in the copper of her braid and in the quiet smile that was all his, that she kept for him, that he had come to know better than any word in any language. "Make the claim again," she said, "with the right words." He looked at her. He took her hands in his. He said in Orcish, with the correct case and the correct house and the correct weight on every syllable, the thing he had mangled in a combat space in front of 12 warriors and half the Grafen market on a windy autumn morning when he had walked forward without knowing entirely why. The thing he had meant then and meant more thoroughly now than he could put in either language. The thing that was the most true and simple fact of his life. He was hers, if she would have him. She put her forehead against his in the orc custom he had learned meant more than words in any language. She held it there for a long, warm, breathing moment. "Better," she said softly. "Was it right?" he said. "It was perfect," she said. And she gathered him in with her strong, certain arms and held on, and the highland valley was spread below them in the starlight, and the festival fires burned at their backs, and the river caught the sky and gave it back brighter. And this was where the story of Abraham Reed and Karga Mudborn arrived, not at an ending but at the place where a life becomes itself, chosen and real and full. Two people who had found each other at a market well in the early morning and decided. In every language they knew, and some they had invented between them, to stay.